I'm doing another book review. I think like 2 years after my last one. This review is going to be about Wicked by Gregory Maguire. I'm actually going to split this up into 2 parts. The first part will be just a review of the book by itself, but I also saw the musical years ago, and I kept thinking about it when I was reading the book. And I just want to talk about some comparisons that I was thinking about between the two of them, but if you haven't seen the musical, I want this first part to be just a review of the book. I really, really enjoyed this book. I basically read this book nonstop for like 4 days and finished it, which for me is pretty fast. I wish I had it with me, but I left it at home, so just pretend that it is right here. A quick summary of Wicked is what it says on the cover, like the tagline, is the life and times of the Wicked Witch of the West. It begins the day before Elphaba, who is the Wicked Witch, is born in Munchkin Land, and it ends the day of her death. I found this book incredibly encapsulating. It was very meaty in terms of lore. It reminded me kind of Memoirs of a Geisha. They were both basically just told through a single character from their birth to their death, more or less. Although Memoirs, I believe, was first person, Wicked is not. I think this book would stand on its own if you haven't seen Wizard of Oz or read the books. Although I don't know why you would be interested in reading it if you haven't, and I also don't know anyone who hasn't seen at least the movie. I haven't read the original books, so it's possible I missed a lot of references that was going on in Wicked. But there's still a pretty clear narrative, so it would stand on its own. The book itself has a lot of misogynistic views, actually, and my interpretation was they're written like that because that's what the world was. It still kind of made me uncomfortable whenever that kind of stuff came up because I was, you know, very like about it. But in terms of what's happening in the world and everything, I don't want to say it makes sense because I think it would have been fine without the whole, you know, like I think one part they were talking about how men have hot anger and women have cold anger. I get that, like, these are the characters who would say that kind of thing. But it's not interesting and it's not true. I don't know whether or not, like, the author actually holds those views. But I'm kind of tired of these fantasy worlds that really just heavily integrate you know, misogyny and racism with Fiyera's character into the story, because it's like, you know, we have that in this world. I wish in the fake world it didn't exist as well. I am aware that there's like 3 other books in Gregory Maguire's Oz series. To be honest, I'm not exactly interested in continuing the series, at least right now, even though I did really enjoy Wicked. That is kind of a positive in that Wicked is its own, you know, self-contained, like, beginning and end, and it's not like it to be continued at the end unless you're really interested in following other characters who aren't the witch. Overall, I think this was a very, very solid read. It did come out in 1995, which so it's older than me. It's not exactly news that it's a good book, but now I can tell you I have read it, and it is very good. If I do more reviews from here on out, I think I will just be saying whether or not I recommend it, because it's so circumstantial, like, when you read it, you know, and, like, you could start a book at one point in your life and hate it, but then a few years later, you know, either because of stuff that's happened or you're just more focused at the time you pick it up again, you like it a lot more, or the opposite. So I will say I do recommend this book, especially if you are really into heavy fantasy, lore-based stuff. I don't read a ton of fantasy, to be honest. Although I guess I haven't been reading a ton lately. Anyway, but this book could also be good if you are writing or creating something where you need to do a lot of world building. I think using this book as sort of a reference of how Gregory Maguire does it could be really helpful. Now for part 2, I want to compare it to the musical. I love Broadway. I saw Wicked when I was in 3rd grade, and it was actually the first Broadway show I saw. I want to talk about this because when I picked up the book, I was thinking it would be very similar to the musical. So I had a lot of like preconceptions going into it, if that's the correct way to use that word. And I was actually surprised about how different the two were. The biggest difference is I was expecting Wicked, the book, to be about Elphaba and Glinda's friendship, because that is like the whole show, is their relationship. And it really just wasn't. The book was really only about Elphaba's life, and Glinda plays a significant role in it, but she is nowhere near as important as Elphaba in the story. This wouldn't be disappointing if the show didn't exist, but I loved how the show was about like these two women who are friends. I was also expecting Dorothy's companions, you know, like the Scarecrow and everyone, to be... I thought that their origins would be in the book as well, and I thought that both because of the show and also on the back of the book they mentioned the Tin Man, and they're just really not. But I remember I was reading the book and there was like 200 pages, 100 pages, 50 pages left, and I was like, when are they gonna talk about how the Cowardly Lion was the lion that was in Elphaba's science class, or how the Tin Man is Bach? They just don't. That doesn't happen, really, aside from a couple throwaway lines. I do understand why these changes were made, because I think in a 2-hour show, obviously you cannot fit 400 odd pages of story into it, so it has to be like, you know, pared down. And I think in a show, it feels much more satisfying for everything to tie together, you know, for like this character to end up being this other character, and not have them be like two separate characters, to where there's like this entire cast of characters with names but who aren't related. Overall, the show is much more, I think, feel good, especially the end, which I won't talk about the differences there, but overall the Broadway show is much more, you know, upbeat and like optimistic, and the book is very like, you know, this is Elphaba's life, and for someone, the only person who exists who has green skin, obviously her life would suck. The one thing I don't like, which I guess this could kind of be a nitpick, but Fiera's character in the book is explicitly described as dark-skinned multiple times. And then in the show, in both the original cast and the show I saw, he's played by a white dude, and I don't get it. He's much more popular in the show as well, because they sort of combine his character traits with another character. But why did he have to be white, though? Like, he was specifically described as having dark skin. I don't really have a point with the second part. I just wanted to kind of spew my thoughts about it. You know, I guess if you've watched this far, you have seen the show and haven't read the book, I guess I would want you to know that they are, like, two very different things, and you shouldn't go in with expectations. Because there were parts where I was disappointed only because I had seen the show. And that's not really a reflection on the book. I do plan on making another review soon, and I do actually have the book with me that I would like to review, so I can hold it up and not do these weird things with my hands. If you've read Wicked, I want to know what you think. If you haven't read Wicked, let me know what you think of this review. and if you're considering reading it in the future. But that's all.